without doubt, constitute Kenya's most consequential political troika. A one-time love triangle that has over time mutated to a hydra-headed political equilibrium capable of pulling in different directions. And this week, the troika was engaged in what some respectable judges would describe as a rupture. Not a boardroom one, for once, but totally paperless for sure. From payment of taxes to prayers and rallies, President William Ruto, his predecessor Uhuru Kenyatta, and former Prime Minister Raila Odinga are on some curious political road carnival. But amid that ruckus, millions of Kenyan children are trying to sort out their future. And the junior secondary schools opened this week against a backdrop of troika commotion. The news gang is back, and so too are the take, the punchline, the memo, and the kicker.
Every citizen must pay tax. That's all I'm saying. And it doesn't matter. Even if they sponsor demonstrations so that they don't pay tax, I want to promise them they will pay tax. There's no more exemption. This country is not the animal farm, where some are more equal than others. We are going to have a society where every citizen carries a fair share of our burden to raise taxes.
And so it begins. What a week it has been on the political front, but also, I know you've missed us. We're back. So it's good to see you, ladies, gentlemen. And we're back in an interesting week. What have the last 7 days been like between these three consequential political leaders? Linus, perhaps to start with you. One, what is the issue here? Two, is there a real issue? Or is this just August 2022 sort of lingering political battles between these three consequential figures?
It's really the latter, in my view. This is a continuation of a contest that began, you could go as far back as about 3-4 years now. When it comes to the relationship between President William Ruto and his predecessor, former President Uhuru Kenyatta, and then you put Raila Odinga, the former Prime Minister, in the mix. These three have unfinished business, and what they have subjected the country to is a continuation of this contest between them that is yet to conclude. And sadly for the country, it has the potential of delaying a lot of things, delaying business, delaying settling down when it comes to now the period after the election, because the country should not just be about elections and campaigns. We had an election, and there was a government that was installed on the 13th of September last year. Yeah. 6 months into this, suddenly there's this rupture. For me, what I read is some unfinished business, and it's taking different forms. When it comes to this question of pay taxes, where have they been? Where has this issue of taxes been? Why is it becoming an issue right now? So, in my view, on the preliminary, it is a continuation. Again, a continuation of the theme that shaped the campaign took, hustlers versus dynasties. When you look at the question of taxation, right now, the names are out there, and it's the name of first President Jomo Kenyatta, and the name of second President Daniel Toroitich arap Moi. And a very contentious law has been cited, and that is the Estate Duty Act, which specifically in Section 7, subsection 3, indicates that the former president, first and second president, are exempted from it. It still reads that way. You can still go there and look at it. And it has provided perfect political fodder for this kind of discussion, where now the whole question of taxes has been narrowed down to the two first families.
And we'll come and talk a little bit about that. But, you know, it's interesting, Elena, that you mentioned unfinished business. One would have imagined that it was finished with finality. We had an election. There was a contestation in court at the highest level, the Supreme Court, which is, you know, has the final say. That matter was done and dispensed with. There's a new administration. But whatever this unfinished business is, it's curious that all those processes that we've set out in our, you know, democracy have been unable to settle whatever, you know, is going on between these three individuals. And you've talked about the taxation issue, but one of the other emerging issues tonight, Jamila, has been, you know, the security of the former president, Uhuru Kenyatta. Reports that we're receiving that it may have been scaled down somewhat. So this is now the next battlefront and the latest one, I think, so far.
This reminds me of something similar that happened last year to the deputy president. And it's almost a case of ulinifanyia mi pia nitakufanyia, if reports are as we've indicated. But something, Yvonne, before I continue with that, I just wanted to point out something that Lina's said. What we are seeing now, Yvonne, I don't think, I think it's new in terms of we've had a time when we had three presidents who are still living. Former President Moi, former President Kibaki, and we had President Uhuru Kenyatta. And we didn't say this. In fact, I remember on Tuesday this week when former President Uhuru Kenyatta had gone to the home of the late Professor George Magoha to condole with his family. He was with the Wiper leader Kalonzo Musyoka, who said something very interesting. He said, during Moi's retirement, some individuals in cabinet wanted him disposed of his Cabernet Gardens home in Nairobi, but the idea was shot down. He said Mzee Kibaki actually ordered former ministers, Chris Murungaro and Kiraitu Murungi, to deliver the title deed to Mzee Moi to show that they respect him. So what we're seeing now has not been seen before, Yvonne. And I'm sure Gashuri will say this, a lot of this is just politics. Because when you talk about taxes, the body that has the responsibility of collecting the taxes is the Kenya Revenue Authority. Have we seen a demand letter? And even if it's been issued there, have we seen it? And then you look at Uhuru Kenyatta as he is now. He is younger. He has the resources. And now there's talk of him supporting Raila Odinga, supporting the rallies that we're seeing across the country. Yep. And that really is what is causing all this, the fact that he's still there and he's not really quiet. So I think that's something we need to consider as we continue, as this war continues. Because Linus has said we have a lot of things that need to be happening in this country. We have promises that this government made when it was being elected, promises that need to be kept to the people. We are seeing all the rises in the cost of electricity. Today we're talking about the rises of the prices in water, the high cost of living. So we have all those things, the promises that were made about job delivery and projects to be finished and development across the country. I think we need to concentrate on that a bit more than what we are seeing.
Yeah, indeed. Francis.
Sum it up, politics, nothing else. Because what you notice now is probably something that was expected either way. By this I mean, look at the twin issue of tax arrears or tax exemptions and the withdrawal or the scaling down of retired President Uhuru Kenyatta's security. First, the question of taxation. If there have been exemptions, are they exemptions that are known publicly? Some, yes, are known. There are some transactions that we saw, and there was talk of exemptions, and it was out there. But if then the political situation was different, let's say the then President Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy were together, the question of exemptions, you would be hearing it from the Raila Odinga side of things. But because of the politics that we saw before the general election and how the outcome eventually became, there should be no surprise that this discussion is with us as it is now. Has there been any demand letter that has been issued to the president, the former president, his family, family businesses that pay X amount of money? Not something that we have seen yet. But at the same time, if there are taxes that he ought to pay, then he should pay, because paying taxes is a patriotic duty for every citizen.
That's right.
But the politics of it is what is coming out. The question of scaling down his security, there is a law that guides the amount of security officers that he's supposed to get. That is something that ordinarily would have happened. You know, the scaling down, and you can't expect that the former president will get the same number of security officers that he got when he was in office. The same happened to retired president, the late Kibaki, the late Moi. The number of security officers who guarded them when they were in office is not exactly the same number of officers who guarded them when they exited office. So it's something that ordinarily would have happened. But the timing brings the politics of it. Why now? Why not then? So it's quite a number of issues that we'll continue to see. And finally, ordinarily, retired President Uhuru Kenyatta should be past tense politically, like we saw with Moi, like we saw with Kibaki. You had very little of them when they exited office.
But this is very different.
But this is very different. Yeah. And if you remember, not so long ago, there was talk of why retired President Uhuru Kenyatta should exit as Azimio chairperson. You remember that discussion? And you'll hear it again and again and again. Actually, you'll even hear talk of why should he enjoy retirement benefits of a retired president while he's
still
active
engaged
in politics.
active politics.
You had the same discussion not so long ago when there was talk of, hey, Raila Odinga should retire first so that he can enjoy the privileges of a retired state officer's benefits. So sum it up, generally, it's all about politics, nothing else.
All right, but I want us to listen to that because, you know, the politics, like you say, it's kicking up steam. And from, you know, no less important persons in the country, the majority leader in the National Assembly, Kimani Ichung'wah, also saying the same thing. I'm hoping we can get to hear from him and play that soundbite now, where he said, you know, the law is clear and everybody should pay taxes. And so you start to hear that these demands for payment of taxes are coming from, you know, rather important figures in that setup. Let's listen to Majority Leader Kimani Ichung'wah.
And the system they abused, the tax collection system they abused, exempting themselves from taxes that they should have paid. KRA now has gone back to them in line with the law to ask them, hey, as much as you are in office and you didn't pay these taxes that you exempted yourself, the law does not allow us to exempt you from any taxes. You have to pay. And when some of them paid, they started sponsoring the demonstrations you are seeing and the rallies to try and intimidate government.
Mimi nataka niwaambie mapema mchana, my friends, sahau mambo ya handshake. Na msituambie ya kwamba ati hamutaki handshake. We can see you, si tunawajua. Hii ukora yenu ya kila siku tunajua. The government of Kenya is not going to be blackmailed to serve the interests of a few people, their families and their businesses. That will not happen. We are going to serve the people of Kenya. Hatuwezi kukubali ati nyinyi watu kidogo mnapanga maandamano hapo, mnaitwa nusu mkate, sijui nini, pesa, what? Hiyo msahau kabisa, na msahau hiyo haiwezekani. Na mtafute mtu mwingine ya kutisha. Tafuteni mwingine. Sio mimi. I will not agree.
Yeah.
See, ordinarily, once again, when you're in office, like President William Ruto is in office, you would wish for an environment that is conducive to allow you to work, devoid of demonstrations, political pressure, and so on and so forth. But see, 177 days after we held a general election, the political temperatures are back very high. And it's unsettling. And when you hear the Azimio leader say, we will announce the next course of action, it's unsettling. It is distracting for a government that is trying to work out a system of how to deliver its pledges. You see, on one hand, the mandate is with the sitting president. The expectations of the electorate is that what he had promised on the campaign trail, he will fulfill. And so he would wish for an environment that allows him to work. But when you have the opposition team piling the kind of pressure that you see is already mounting, it's quite distracting. And so the idea then also is hit back by turning the hit on the opposition team and say what they are doing is to try and push for a handshake. Because if you look at our politics previously, when you have such contestation and such agitation, it yields into something of a handshake, whether a joint government or a coalition government or a working arrangement of sorts. And very soon, you will hear a lot of that kind of a discussion. And no surprise, including, I think this Sunday, there's another rally, and another Sunday, and another Sunday. And that is where now President Uhuru Kenyatta comes in. When there are allegations that he is the sponsor of the demonstrations, of course, something that has been denied, then you can now understand why pressure is also being directed his way.
In his direction. And we'll talk a little bit about what Raila is now starting to do, because it would seem like, President William Ruto has to deal with the Uhuru factor, but he also has to deal with the Raila factor. But, the issue, I just want to talk about the issue of security scaling down, because that's usually what it's called. And it's a tactic we've seen in the country several times. Now, again, it is unconfirmed today with the former president what the status of his security is. But, history has a way of repeating itself in the country. In fact, this was the same thing that happened to then Deputy President William Ruto, was it last year? And that was not the first time. In 2019, I believe, MPs that were allied to him then, remember then they were in the Tanga wing, is that what it was called then? Security was withdrawn. And you remember the complaints came from none other than the Kikuyu town MP, Kimani Ichung'wah. We've seen that severally, and the police call it reorganization of police services personnel. I mean, we could go on and on. John Lonyangapuo has had, the former West Pokot governor has had his security scaled down, withdrawn, recalled. You start to hear, words and phrases like those. In 2017, when it was the NASA leaders, you will recall, their security detail was withdrawn. In fact, remember, Wiper leader Kalonzo Musyoka went to court about this, and he's not the only one. I mean, there's so many. You remember the court summoning the then PS and CS, Karanja Kibicho, and Matiang'i on some of these questions. I mean, the examples are endless about, what happens in the country. And when you are not in favor with the current regime, that's typically something that happens. And, it's termed as we're not withdrawing, we are reorganizing, we are redeploying, recalling, that sort of thing. So this is something we've seen in the country. This is, of course, has been not confirmed by those in the authorities, but, there's history. It's prologue.
That
you see,
we can do it.
Yeah.
You see, Yvonne, security officers, whether you're talking about a regular policeman, the elite general service unit, the presidential escort unit, the various companies, including security officers that actually turn up for their work in very smart suits and civilian gear. These are the symbols of political power, real political power, which is why you see politicians, and you've described it very well and across time, you see politicians speaking to each other sometimes through this means of withdrawing security, withdraw the police. If you are appointed cabinet secretary or permanent secretary, the evening you arrive at your home, at the gate, whether it's your rural home or your urban home, there will be a uniformed administration police officer in very nice camouflage or uniform. And that is a symbol of power. Even Francis, you call it kufika.
Yeah.
and that is what politicians speak to each other with, which is why you see these games of withdraw this, limit this number, add, or because it's their language. I mean, it works exactly like old school privileges of a prefect in school. Yeah. Especially if you're at the dining hall. Dining hall. Yeah. Dining hall was a very yes. You have to you get the privilege to.
You decide who gets top layer. Crust.
Not only deciding, but you don't queue. You go to the front, and so these are the benefits. And it's still, I'm so sorry to use this, but it's still at a very primitive stage in Kenya, because it's about that display. Politicians even make a big show of how they arrive at a place. Now, you see sometimes, even when the road is clear, and it's been blocked from all other vehicles, you still see, you know, the security vehicles overlapping and making a show of the movement. Because it's the African thing, you know, you don't do these things in Netherlands. I think you were in The Hague and you saw how a prime minister can actually arrive in a bicycle.
Or ride to work.
But in Kenya, you have to arrive with those motorcycles and all that. So it's a language that politicians understand very well. If you withdraw that security, you are making a very, very strong statement. But back to some point that you made, Jamila, earlier on. This has never happened. It has happened during President Uhuru Kenyatta's term, and now it's happening in President William Ruto's term. Together, Uhuru, who came to office in 2013, when history is written, and you know we keep forgetting that, you know, America is on its 45th.
Yeah. No,
46th president right now. Now, 46 presidents down the road, what kind of history will be written about Uhuru and then the period after? If you look at the first, second, and third president, there was something about, first of all, being decent with your predecessor, their family. And even if, and these are not people who not necessarily loved each other, maybe they have issues, but do they play out in public? Never. Not between President Moi and Kenyatta, and not between Mwai Kibaki and Moi. Mwai Kibaki took over from Moi, and he treated Moi quite decently, even after pressure from some of his allies who thought, hey, go for these Kanu guys, we've defeated them, go for the title deeds and things like that. They still treated them very, very decently. Then come Uhuru, 2013, 2017, 2022. Yeah. And first of all, they fight as president and deputy president. Very ugly show, the ugliest in terms of those offices. And considering that they are the two that came to those positions under the current constitution. So a very, very bad show. And now there is this post-election violence, not the violence one. I want to use the slang violence when it comes to how you treat each other and how you are talking, because this is what we are witnessing. So when history is written, this chapter might actually look really ugly on presidential decency, how you treat each other at that level. Look, since independence, they've only been, this is the fifth president. So it's a very small club. Yeah. And only two of them are alive. If, strictly speaking, if they were to form a WhatsApp group, they are only two. So they are on to a really bad show in terms of setting precedent, in terms of setting the tone for future presidential politics. This is not nice. Even if there are issues arising from previous term in office, there should be some Kenyan way of doing it. And here is something that maybe is missing, and that is information. When you're talking of taxation, are you really talking about the amendment of 69 or the amendment of 1981? Or are you talking about the merger of CBA and NIC? Yeah. Because you need to be very specific. Because when you look at, and I would just want us to listen to Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua's statement today on paying taxes.
Everybody must pay taxes.
Yes, let's see that.
And I want to say, we want to ask the Senate to back the President and the Executive in ensuring that everybody must pay tax. It doesn't matter who you are. We are going to develop this country with our own resources because we have stopped borrowing. Because we are saying, if you are in a hole, don't continue digging. First stop digging and figure out how to get out of the hole. And one of the ways of getting out of the hole is collecting tax from everybody. It doesn't matter how far back it goes. And also stopping exemptions. Nobody will be exempted from paying tax in this country. And if you want to be exempted from paying tax, you buy an advert in the newspaper and apply to the people of Kenya. The President, the CS National Treasury will not exempt anybody from paying taxes.
Everybody should pay taxes. When you listen to this, you'd think there's a national tax collection crisis. People have refused to pay taxes. Nobody should pay. Nobody should be exempted. If these politicians were to be specific, it is within the Troika. This is a fight between President William Ruto and his predecessor, Uhuru Kenyatta. We don't have a national crisis in the collection of taxes, but they have, they have whipped it up in a way that if you are a foreigner coming to Kenya and watching Kenyan TV, see the leaders talking about taxation, you would think, oh, we must be doing really, really badly. No, all this is language that could easily be reduced to one sphere, and that is state house politics between the current administration and the former administration.
Yvonne, I found something interesting about this whole issue, because the first time this talk about President Uhuru Kenyatta supporting the rallies and trying to hide behind protecting his businesses by hiding behind the rallies was spoken by 4 senators from Central Kenya. I don't know if you have any of those sound bites. We don't. So there are 4 senators from Central Kenya, from Nyeri, Kirinyaga, Nyandarua, and a nominated senator who spoke, I think it was at KICC, and talked about how the president is hiding his vast businesses behind supporting the rallies. And the next day, President William Ruto spoke about it. I think he was in Mombasa. And I think this also caused a reaction from former President Uhuru Kenyatta. But first, it's because Wiper leader Kalonzo Musyoka spoke about it when they went to condole with the family of the former education minister. I don't know if we have the sound bites of Kalonzo Musyoka and the former president. Maybe we can hear those.
The Professor Magoha wanted a country which is all inclusive, which is devoid of corruption, open corruption, a country that is spewing hatred right now. What would George think of hearing his number one? Because I've heard about number one severally. Number one now being victimized.
We live in a country where people are so dishonest, they love lies, they behave as if there was nothing happening yesterday. They are lecturing us now about things they think they are new. If Professor Magoha had not served as the Minister of Education, Your Excellency, your plan for NEMIS, the National Education Information Management System, will not have worked. And let nobody take credit for this. This was President Kenyatta's plan, together with the World Bank, and that's how we got to where we are.
Na wewe Steve, usijali hii watu wanapiga mdomo. Wacha wapige bana. Unajua mtu ambaye hana kitu kingine ya kufanya lazima apige mdomo. Wacha wapige mdomo. Hiyo ni dunia. Sisi tunaendelea na yetu. There are people who talk a lot about what they will do and do nothing. And those are many. But there are people who will talk very little but do a lot, and their deeds are seen. Magoha belongs to that class of people who are doers.
The president was speaking at the home of former Minister George Magoha after what Kalonzo Musyoka said, kwamba unadhalilishwa, unaibishwa. And he spoke. It's not like he's not been in the news since his retirement. He's been busy with DRC, the peace process, and he hasn't really spoken about local politics until this point, Yvonne. But when I look at that and we see the issues about repealing Section 7.3 of the Estate Duty Act, Cap 83, someone would say then, why doesn't someone go to Parliament, sponsor a bill? If you're going to repeal this, repeal it. But I don't know how true this is or not. But if this happens, would it also mean that your inheritance, Yvonne, maybe for instance, from your father, the 100 by 200 plot of land that you have back home, is it safe also? Would you need to pay taxes on that also? Because we need to look at the implications of some of these things. Yes, there's the politics of it all, but what about the optics in terms of what we are seeing in the country as Kenyans? And Lina was talking about as a visitor coming to the country, the current president, the former president, exchanging words in public. Yes, and what they represent in this country, the top 3 politicians, what image are we creating? That perception is not good. If there are things that need to be done, then let's follow the law and see it to completion. Then now we can talk about, well, we did it, but we followed the law.
You get the final word, then we take a break.
You see, retired President Uhuru Kenyatta by and large, is still an opponent of this administration by his deeds and his own words before the general election and even after the general election.
Yeah.
You remember he went to a function and said his leader is still Raila Odinga, for all intents and purposes. And so there's yet to, put it this way, his political alignment prior to the general election was consequential then as it is now. Because if, let's say he had not taken any political sides and silently... As
Kibaki did before the 2013...
Of course, Kibaki took sides, but he didn't do it publicly.
Right, yeah.
If retired President Uhuru Kenyatta had done the same thing, would there be demands today of him to pay certain taxes, arrears or exemptions that he was accorded or he accorded himself when he was president? I highly doubt that would be the case. The reason why he's being targeted now is because of his political choices, then and now, number one. Number two, if it was a concrete discussion about non-payment of taxes, we would have figures by now. I mean, we've seen business people and companies being slapped with specific tax arrears bills, 10 billion, 20 billion, 13 billion, whichever amount of money. As we speak now, it's a discussion that has no figures. Like, this is the amount of money that he should pay. This is the amount of money that he owes. This is the amount of money that he ought to pay back.
And typically that demand would come from the Kenya Revenue Authority.
So far, none.
Yeah.
And that is the reason why this discussion is more about politics than taxes. And I highly doubt we will see any figures until maybe such a time that KRA formally takes over the matter. For now, the demands for payment of taxes is being done by politicians and not by the body that is mandated to collect taxes from you and I and everybody else. So as it is now, treat this discussion purely from a political point of view. And it's largely to put the former president on his defense. Especially if there are allegations
you saw that now, him coming
it is
out
to put him on the defense.
Yeah.
And remember, the former president had not spoken about this administration since the election was conducted. The first time he has spoken is when he went to Magoha's place. And actually it was as a result of some instigation by Kalonzo, by Matiang'i, who spoke before him. It was a reaction, a loaded reaction, not direct, but a loaded reaction all the same. I will not be surprised if this discussion about taxation, downsizing of the security detail dominates the next political rally or something like that. And you will get a similar rejoinder from the Kenya Kwanza administration, because this is a matter that is being played at the theater of politics. Maybe very, very finally, there exists a law on what is to be accorded to a retired president. The number of security officers that he should get for his homes in Nairobi or in the rural areas, the number of gardeners that he should get, the number of laundry people that he should get, the number of housekeepers that he should get. It is in the law. So I highly doubt it would be possible to take all the officers who guard the former president. It would obviously be a security issue. But the numbers, as Lina said, will be scaled down, because politics is also what you see. It's also about optics. When you have 5, 7, 10, 20, 100
you seem
plus,
more important.
You seem more powerful and important.
Yeah.
When you scale down, there's some deflation that happens.
Yeah.
So that's what we are being treated to. Nothing else but politics.
Okay, nothing else but politics. One of the other things that some say triggered this whole thing was the rallies that had been started by Raila Odinga. We'll take a break. We also want to talk about the transition to junior high, but I want to spend just a bit of time talking about, what Raila's game plan is. It's Machozi Mondays now, Machozi Sundays, or what's happening there. And what is his beef? Does he have a stake in this game? Because that's where it all originated with some of those rallies. When we come back, the hashtag is NewsGang. We'll be talking about that and a lot more, including just what parents, learners, and teachers are having to contend with in that great big exodus.